Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
We are the two fat brokers, gracing you with our presence once again. I'm Barney from Dubai, and this is
Ben from Abu Dhabi.
And we are here to talk to you about the wildly exciting news of corporate tax,
Hold on to your hats.
which is due to come into effect in 2023, so 12 months from now. When in 2023, we don't know. I am deeply saddened by this news, but I kind of understand why they're doing it. Ben, why don't you kick us off with your thoughts?
Well, we'll try and link this into property, as much as we can, so everyone knows UAE is something of a tax haven. We don't have many taxes here, but something that small businesses in particular have complained for a long time is there's a lot of visa fees and license fees and things like that, and people have actually been asking for a corporation tax, because a corporation tax is only on profits. Okay, so if you don't make any profit, you don't pay any tax. But if you don't make any profit, you still got to pay your visa fees and your license fees and your PRO fees and all that kind of stuff. So it does make a lot of sense as long as those other fees fall away. As long as they start to reduce those other fees.
Tax threshold after which point you don't pay for your visas and things like that.
Well, I mean, it would be good if they just made visas, nominal, 500 dirhams or something. I mean, they're not particularly expensive now, but I guess it all adds up. And also, you need a license fee and things like that. But then again, does that make barriers to entry too low? So something that we complain about in real estate all the time is any old Tom, Dick and Harry can start a real estate company within reason. I mean, in Dubai, you guys have got RERA, and the barrier to passing your RERA exam is pretty
it's
strict.
A 5-day test with a guaranteed pass, unless you're some kind of troglodyte.
Oh, it's guaranteed pass?
Unless you're
pretty difficult.
Guaranteed, unless you're a troglodyte. So it's a 5-day course, and after which, if you've completed the 5 days and complete a very minor test, you get your RERA exam. You get your RERA card.
I mean, in Abu Dhabi, there is an exam to pass, but you don't have to pass it to set up a real estate company, in theory. So
I think that
it would
change
lower
because
barriers
now,
to entry for smaller companies.
Now you don't have to have a local sponsor. So originally it was for local sponsors to own a real estate company, and they didn't have to take the exam.
But in Dubai, you can own a real estate company without a local sponsor?
I am now allowed to jettison my sponsor.
In Abu Dhabi, it's not one of the approved.
No, we are approved in Dubai.
Okay.
You're allowed to own a real estate company here and be the sole proprietor of it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So then, to go back to corporate tax. So corporate tax does not affect, in terms of property, and they've been very specific about this, doesn't affect your individual property holdings. So you won't have to pay tax on if you have a property portfolio, which I think is kind of interesting for, let's say, wholly owned companies. Let's say I'm a high net worth individual and I've created a company to hold all my buildings and stuff like that. That company is going to be taxed, but if I held them myself, they wouldn't be taxed. So there's obviously going to be some more stringent rules around that. But hopefully it won't lead to, companies which hold real estate sort of falling away, and hopefully they'll be able to manage those rules in the best way possible, because there still is no personal tax. And so the difficulty is, and I'm sure they're going to think about it and have thought about it, is how do you stop people just having everything just owned personally so they don't pay any tax, as opposed to owned through a company where they will have to pay tax.
Offshore companies.
Yeah, but I mean, offshore companies presumably will still have to pay tax. If you have an offshore company who owns...
Yeah, they'd be owned by an onshore.
Yeah, so I mean, that's an interesting situation. What will companies that own property do? Because 9% tax is low globally for sure, but it's not nothing.
What about the companies in free zones?
Free zones will still be taxed.
They will.
Yeah. Or else everyone would they wouldn't even do land size stuff. And even actually, companies in free zones probably legally can't or shouldn't be owning property outside the free zone, because they're not doing business in the free zone. I don't know if that's necessarily applied, but free zone companies are supposed to only do business in the free zone.
So what's in it for the government, apart from the 9%? Why are they doing it?
Well, so to broaden the tax base, so we've had VAT for a while now, so that's a great tax driver for the government. But there's a lot of corporations here who are paying zero tax, and the problem with, and we mentioned it at the top, the problem with the way the government collects money now is through these fees, is through your registration fees, through your visas, is through
SALIC.
Yeah, yes, through SALIC's a good example, and that hits any kind of flat fee, hits the poor the most. So speeding fines is a great example. Rich guy speeds, he pays the same amount as a poor guy. So proportionally, that's a much greater portion of the poor guy's wealth.
I think in Norway it's means tested. I think it's Norway.
I think that's probably the only country where it is. Yeah, so richer people pay more fines.
Yeah, there was a story of some chap with a €23,000 speeding fine because he was means tested, and he was obviously very wealthy and going very, very fast.
Yeah.
Late for a very important meeting.
Yeah, so being taxed on profits is a great way to move the tax burden away from the little guys into the big guys. So the big companies pay a huge amount more and the little guys pay zero or nothing. Whereas right now, an enormous company with a real estate license is still paying, I don't know, whatever it is here, 10, 15,000 dirhams. Whereas small companies like ourselves are also paying exactly the same amount. So proportionally, that burden's falling massively on us. Whereas it should be, I mean, talking a little bit kind of left wing here, it should be more evenly spread because, I shouldn't be paying, I don't know, 5% of my income on these things.
It should be leaning towards the right, should we say.
Yeah, so that is what hopefully this corporation tax will do if they reduce those flat fees. And therefore, it'll broaden the tax base as well. And to be honest, it's a great incentive for the government to bring more and more companies in.
Is that going to affect more and more large companies turning away from the UAE?
Well, that's a really interesting point because there's obviously I don't know if it's really a battle, but right now Saudi Arabia is competing very hard for business. Right, they are really trying to get GCC headquarters to come and set up in Riyadh and Jeddah and places like that.
The party line is if your headquarters aren't here, you can't do business here.
Yeah. So how will a UAE corporation tax of 9% affect that? Will corporations go, actually, that's probably a good idea. Let's go to Saudi. We're going to save money that way, and that's what corporations are about. So it might drive some companies that way. But I think what it is designed to do is to help, startups, to help smaller businesses. Although the threshold, which I think is about 375,000, is quite low. So you don't pay tax on your first 375,000 of profit, which is not a huge amount, and that's quite low. So it'll be interesting to see, what happens there. But in terms of directly talking about property, it doesn't affect personal property.
No.
It affects us because we have businesses, which will one day be profitable, hopefully.
I mean,
so we can pay some tax.
It will affect, going back to our last podcast about holiday lets, it will affect holiday let companies.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think it'll only affect the management companies.
Yeah,
if it's your own personal
Sorry, I was
portfolio,
talking about management companies.
Yeah, it shouldn't affect you. Yeah, but I think it's a positive thing. Been talking about this for a bit, having a bit of corporation tax if it replaces those flat ones. Why?
That tax is a positive.
He's a socialist. He loves a good bit of tax. Tax the rich and spend it helping out the poor.
He was like a regular Robin Hood.
Yeah, but so far, and we'll update you when we hear more. There's only really been mention of personal real estate not being affected. So your own personal income, wherever that may be from your investments, from your salary, from your property, will not be taxed. It's only, companies that will have to pay.
Well, watch this space. I mean, I think they're going to flesh it out, obviously, as the year goes. So we'll hopefully get a little bit more information, and we'll see what the rub of the green is. We'll do another one of these in 6-8 months' time. And see what's new. I
mean, it's an enormous move. They're going to have to issue a huge amount of guidance. They're going to have to, if you've ever seen tax, legislation in the UK, it's like, 10 books like that. So it'll be very, very interesting to see what kind of guidance they come out with. And they've got a year to do it, so it's quite a short time.
Good news for accountants, though.
Yes.
If you're thinking about
very
setting
good
up an
news.
accountancy business, Avante.
Yeah, now's the time. Now's the time.
All right, guys, we've been Two Fat Brokers. That has been about tax. I've been Barney.
I've been Ben from Abu Dhabi.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.